So I want to apologize, first of all. I really, really wanted to be with you in person, and hopefully when next you have an event, I'll be there in person. Unfortunately, I had a clash of events today, so I couldn't be with you. But I'm looking forward to the next event where I will be able to attend in person. But I'm going to try and do my best to shed some light on the topic that's really, really important to me. And hopefully I can make it exciting for you as well. So I'll be speaking about innovating our way to the future. And Nigeria and Africa are extremely close to my heart in terms of I'm continually thinking about ways to develop and ways to innovate and ways to really change our story in Africa from one of poverty into prosperity. So in this talk, I'll be saying why it's so imperative for us to grow and innovate and why it's so important. I'll go on to talk about 5 ways that every single person in this room can help Nigeria and Africa to innovate and to grow. And then I'll be finishing off by talking about why I think the time is now and why I think we have a very, very unique opportunity to grow. So I'll start with what everybody knows. Things that top. Africa faces significant challenges in reducing poverty. Things are expensive, transport is expensive, subsidies have been removed, unemployment is going up, economic growth is slowing. And without innovation, these economic disparities may worsen. However, by embracing technology and innovation, Africa can drive a national development agenda and create a brighter future for everybody. And I think that this is so exciting. We're used to the traffic jams and the power outages and the challenges that we face in Africa, from infrastructure to power to education. And I think that innovation holds the solutions to all of these challenges. And one of my favorite professors, who I'm going to be quoting throughout this presentation, he's a professor at Harvard called Professor Ricardo Hausman, emphasizing the fact that innovation transforms challenges into opportunities. And that's what I'm going to be inviting everybody to think about as I go through this presentation. China, Brazil, and India are emerging economies. But when you look at the biggest 500 companies in the world, when you look at this Fortune 500, you find that China, as of 2015, had 98, so almost 100 big companies in its country. Brazil had 7 big companies. India had 7 big companies. Even when you put all 54 countries in Africa together, we still don't have a single one. The clock is ticking, and African countries must innovate faster if we want to join the ranks of top performers. America is 30 times richer than it was 200 years ago. And it's not because it was producing 30 times more of what it was producing 200 years ago, but it's because it's producing different kinds of goods that didn't exist, with different kinds of techniques that didn't exist. And this is something that Africa needs to replicate. If America had just 1% lower growth since 1980, it would be about as poor as Mexico is today. And that's why I believe that economic growth is the most precious quantity in the entire world. And without it, most of us simply wouldn't exist. Professor Hausman says that the ability to make things is the most important factor when it comes to development. So if Nigerians can make things, if Africans can make things, then we will move from poverty to prosperity. All we have to do is develop that ability to make things that the world wants. So, a tale of 2 countries. Ghana in 1962, and Thailand in 1962. In 1962, both Ghana and Thailand had exactly or roughly the same levels of know-how and export productivity. Ghana was actually a lot better off. So in 1962, a lot of people that were super forecasters that were forecasting the future said that Ghana would definitely do a lot better economically than Thailand, because Ghana was investing more in education. Ghana was closer to Europe, closer to America, and also people in Ghana spoke English. So it was easy for sort of forecasters to predict, or economic theorists to predict, that Ghana would do a lot better than Thailand. Fast forward to where we are now, and Thailand has completely transformed its economy and is currently one of the world's top 25 exporters. Thailand is 5 times richer than Ghana. Ghana recently became insolvent to some extent by defaulting on its Eurobonds, on all the money it had borrowed, and is in economic turmoil. And that's why innovation matters. That ability to make things that people want differentiated Thailand from Ghana. And if we as Africans can make things that people want, then we can move from poverty to prosperity. Innovation is the fuel of economic growth. And I'm just going to, because I work in the startup industry as a venture capitalist, I'm going to just give you a few mind-blowing facts about startups and about the innovation sector. 1 in 6, so 1 in 6 of the biggest 500 listed companies in America were venture capital funded. 6 out of 10 of the largest companies on the list of the top 500 publicly listed companies were venture capital funded. Venture capital funded companies, innovative, high growth technology companies, represent $50 trillion in value. That's nearly 50% of the entire S&P. Innovation matters. Making things that people want matters. Technology matters. And there are lots of examples of countries that didn't know how to make things, that learned how to make things. And that's what makes me so convinced that Africa can do the same. If you think about Japan, if you think about South Korea, if you think about Singapore, if you think about Ireland, if you think about China, they were all formerly poor countries that got rich by making things that the world needs. And that's exactly what I think Nigeria has the capacity to do. Now, these are 5 things. I put together 5 things that every single person in this room can do to help us innovate into the future. Because whenever we have these conversations, we say, oh, you know, we're sort of hopeless and there's no hope and we can't do anything and we're just sad. And I want to give us a template of actually 5 things that we all have the ability to do or help other people to do that can take us from poverty to prosperity, that are all within our control, so all within our locus of control, so that we can leave this event with and go and start executing on. Number 1, consider working for government. We all say that we need state capacity. We need smart people in government. We need the people that know what they're doing. But it's impossible to have state capacity without people with capacity working for the state. So when people say that government can't stimulate their minds and it's so boring and it's so slow and it's so dirty, but they want state capacity, I tell them that it's impossible to have state capacity without people with capacity working in the state. So we need smart people going to work for government. The McKinsey Global Institute looked at 71 emerging countries or economies, just like Nigeria, and only 18 of them managed to do 3 to 5% economic growth consistently. And one factor that contributed to their success was pro-growth policy, pushed by government. I'm going to close this slide with a quote from another professor, one of my favorite professors from Stanford University, Professor Jeffrey Pfeffer. You should read his books, watch his YouTube videos. He's an amazing person. And he says that if we want more instances of power being used for good, we need to ensure that more good people understand and are willing and able to use the principles of power. So one thing you can do is get your hands dirty. The second thing is collaboration with government. Now, I work with a number of think tanks and do a lot of research for government, so submitting papers through groups like the NESG, through the Chambers of Commerce, through the various voluntary organizations that we have across Nigeria, trade unions, etc., to government. Because government need ideas, and citizens have the intelligence, the research capabilities, and the willingness sometimes to produce those ideas. I always say that the American government is actually the tech and innovation industry's sugar daddy, in the sense that even the internet itself was actually an American government project. 85% of all new drug molecules in America are funded by government grants. When you look at Google's core algorithm, it was developed with a National Science Foundation grant. Even innovative companies like Tesla, for instance, received government loans to the tune of nearly $500 million, which helped the company grow at a really important time. The COVID vaccine, Moderna, and all of the technology that has come about from having mRNA technology was the result partly of a $25 million DARPA grant from the US government. And when you think about the sorts of developments that we're having in personalized medicine, drugs that are not generic for everybody, but personalized to particular people, the Human Genome Project, which will cost the US taxpayers $3.8 billion, is the foundation of all of these new drugs that we're seeing on the market today. So work with government, number one, or collaborate with government, number two. Write policy papers, suggest things to policy, volunteer for committees, volunteer on think tanks. This is something that you can do because we know from the evidence that I presented a few slides ago that moving from poverty to prosperity requires pro-growth policy. And I think the people in this room could put together a 40, 60-page policy paper. If you don't want to join a think tank, put it online. But the government do need ideas, practical ideas, evidence-based ideas, data-driven ideas, ideas that have a really, really firm financial and economic model behind them that can move us from poverty to prosperity. Number three, make education and learning a priority. We've never had so much information, never in history have we had so much information at our fingertips, from ChatGPT to YouTube, to social media. It's so imperative for us to invest in our own education and as learn as much as we can through social media, through books, through mentors. And this is making education as young people a priority is so important. Indian managers have taken over the global corporate environment because they have a great education system, right? But we don't have to rely solely on external factors to get our education. Education essentially has become free. All you have to pay for is the data. And I'd encourage everybody to pursue education like their life depends on it. And when you think about education, or when we talk about education in Nigeria, there's this sort of school na scam attitude where we think that education doesn't matter. But for technology, and there's also a prevalent sort of narrative in the media that actually school dropouts do the best when it comes to building billion-dollar companies. But the data actually tells a very different story. Only 4% of the founders of billion-dollar tech companies are college dropouts. 96% of them have a degree. 60% of them have a master's. 22% of them have a PhD. So if we want our country to move from poverty to prosperity, all of us making education and learning a priority is one of the keys to that development. Investing in healthcare. I know I'm running out of time. So all I'll say is you can't have a productive, innovative economy without good healthcare. Healthcare is one of the largest employers in the world. Healthcare companies are some of the largest companies on stock exchanges around the world. Healthcare makes people healthy and productive. It contributes to economic growth by contributing to big companies and is a mega employer of labor. Investing in healthcare will help Nigeria and Africa move from poverty to prosperity. And then the most important one is discipline. When I'm discussing career development, I categorize individuals into three groups. There's the coasters, so people that sort of prioritize leisure time and personal interest over professional ambition, and that's fine. They're very content with that choice. There's the hustlers that strive for career advancement and are willing to sacrifice anything, personal time, make big personal sacrifices for success. And lastly, there's this massive group, I would say, sort of 70% to 80%, the miserable middle, I call them. And these are people that desire the rewards of the hustlers, but lack the dedication, resilience, and discipline to achieve them. If we want Nigeria to move from poverty to prosperity, then we need to embrace discipline. And nobody sort of verbalizes discipline better and the kind of discipline required than Dean Keith Simonton in his book Greatness, and where he says that making it big is a career. People who wish to do so organize their entire lives around a single enterprise. They must be monomaniacs, even megalomaniacs about their pursuit. They must start early, labor continuously, and never give up the cause. Success is not for the lazy. So 5 things: consider working in government, consider collaborating with government, make education and learning a priority, invest in healthcare, and most importantly, discipline. Why do I think the time is now? Why do I think it's so essential for people in this room to embrace innovation today? One of the largest mobile phone companies in the world, called Tranison, has its major market in Africa. It's a $10 billion company. And in the past 20 years, they have used the African market to become one of the biggest smartphone manufacturers in the world. It's the Apple of Africa. If a company can come from China and find their major market in Africa, that means that there's opportunity. Another indicator of opportunity is the research done by a professor at INSEAD, and I promise this is the last professor that I'm going to quote. And he says that maximum GDP growth, maximum economic growth, happens when the median age of a population is 32. India right now are killing it economically. Their median age is 28, so they're coming up to 32. China, however, is slowing down. Their median age is 39. Japan is growing even more slowly. Their median age is 49. Senegal and many African countries are between 18 and 23, which means it's come up time for us. The demographics are in our favor for rapid economic growth, the kind that you see in India, the kind that you saw in China and Japan. Our time is now. And by thinking about how we can contribute to those 5 things that I said everybody in the room can do, I believe that we can move from poverty to prosperity. And I'm going to end with this picture of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, because I hear a lot of defeated attitudes. People feel like there's nothing that they can do. People feel like they don't have a choice. People feel like their fate is sealed. And this picture of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden was the first Bible story that really sort of highlighted the fact that we have free choice. I mean, in the Garden of Eden, there could have just been a wall around the apple and nobody could have gone there because it was impossible to actually go and pick the apple. But one of the greatest gifts and privileges and freedoms that we have as human beings is free choice. And I'm going to finish on that note with a quote from one of my favorite authors, Jim Collins. He wrote a book called Good to Great. You should read it if you haven't. And he says that in the end, we can only control a tiny sliver of what happens to us. But even so, we are free to choose, free to become great by choice. Thank you very much.